This episode of Hak5 is brought to you by Domain.com.
Hello, welcome to Hak5. My name's Darren Kitchen.
I'm Shannon Morse.
She just does that.
I'm broken.
We'll get a new one. In the meantime, we are back from DEF CON, a little loopy, a little happy. It is the 19th season.
Dude, we've been home for a couple of weeks. I think
what are you talking about?
we can't use that as an excuse anymore.
Right. We're going to need a new excuse for why we're so loopy. We can't wait to see you this Saturday at the open house, hakhouse.club, to get signed up so that you can come on out to the Hak5 warehouse and
come on out, everybody.
Get a cage match.
Bring your dogs. And your guinea pigs,
your
parrots.
Yes, because we have a quadcopter cage match that has nothing to do with your guinea pigs. But yeah, did you see the acrylic cube? Anyway, it's crazy stuff. 4-foot cube of death.
That's awesome. So we have a couple of really awesome interviews for you today, both from DEF CON, from a couple of speakers there. The first one is from Marte Løge, and the second one is from Terry Gold.
Yes, and we're talking about RFID hacking. You're talking about some
Android passwords and how you can figure them out by knowing somebody.
I know her password. 0000. Anyway, with that said, we're going to just jump right over to there, and we'll see you on the other side. RFID, access control systems, you probably have one at work. It's the thing where you hold the card up to the system and it goes boop and the door unlocks. But how secure are they? To find out, we've been joined with Terry Gold, founder of ID Analyst. Terry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you just had a epic workshop at DEF CON 23. It's been a week and a half. Are you sane? Are you surviving?
I haven't been home since, so this is the first time back in the office, but it's good to be back, rested, and reflecting back and getting feedback. So that's all good.
So tell me about the workshop. So you're talking about RFID systems, and we've seen a lot in the past about vulnerabilities in our RFID cards. But you're taking maybe a different approach here.
Yeah, I've been in the secure identity space for about 15 years, and so I've worked for manufacturers that have a lot of the engineering patents, the know-how. But I've also been the guy in the middle figuring out how enterprises make all these proprietary systems work, and not necessarily a friend to all the vendors, because they've had such a proprietary lock on all the systems. So I've had to really be in the boat of deconstructing a lot of that to open it up for enterprises so they can be more flexible and use their systems and not really be held, hijacked by the proprietary vendors. So you learn a lot. Having to go ahead and deconstruct a lot of this that I think, when you go to a lot of the conferences, you'll see something about a specific ID card, and somebody will go and clone that or show you what the data looks inside of that one. But the reality is that there's hundreds of different types of binary layouts and sequences to these things. So what we wanted to do, myself and my co-workshop trainer, Val Thomas, is we've worked together over the years in red team situations and helped each other out. And we wanted to have a workshop environment where people could get hands-on the tools, understand the different data, take a red team perspective and know what they were looking at, and help determine the steps of what type of methods they would need to use, what type of data they were looking at. Because I think if you take some things out of context from some of the talks that you might see, you go to use that one method and then you just be stumped because it doesn't apply to an enterprise environment. So that was really the goal of the workshop, to get hands-on and help the people attending understanding what they look at and what might be the appropriate steps to really execute in that environment.
So how does it work in that environment? In that enterprise deployment of an RFID-based system, specifically access controls, what are the kind of implementations that you see? And in that, where may the vulnerabilities lie?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So let me take that in a couple of parts. There are many different types of RFID. So when we talk about RFID, it's radio frequency identification. So it comes down to what frequency do you have, what data is being transmitted over that frequency, is it encrypted, how is it encrypted, and then there are different ways of going about it. And so there are different technologies even in play. So when we hear RFID, the next question I always say is, well, which RFID are you talking about? Because some are very easy and some are very difficult, and they're all quite different. I would say about 80% of the corporate enterprise market is about what you hear about as procs, 125 kilohertz. There's no protection. So that's where you can get into cloning and manipulating the data very easily.
Well, because there's so many different standards and frequencies that RFID work under, how is the penetration tester or the security researcher to analyze these systems?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is there aren't many standards. That's kind of the problem. So when you look at all of what's out there, generally there's specifications, if you're lucky, but not many standards.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So while there are standards as far as the frequencies are concerned, that's really your PHY layer, and it's the implementations of those that differ?
Yeah, exactly. So you might have stuff like a new technology that just came out, and you can find the specification, but it's not a standard. It's proprietary by a specific vendor. They may not publish all of it. And then how the different manufacturers implement it can be entirely different from one to the other, so they're not compatible at all.
You had mentioned patents. Is it because of patents and trade secrets and things of that nature that the underlying security is pinned to?
No, it has nothing to do with security. It's all obscurity. This whole market, for the past, since it's been going on, has been all about obscurity and not security. So
and what, just to maintain a edge in the market?
Yeah, it's been a lot about channel exclusivity. So that's how, when you go in, have you ever gone to an organization and you've seen that they have, 5 different access cards that they're using in one organization? They have 2 different access cards. I know some organizations that have, some person has 10 different access cards because one will get you into one building, the other won't get you into the other.
Wow, that's thankfully the sites that I've been on, the whole building was standardized on, say, Castle or something like that.
Yeah, so you'll see that in larger organizations that acquire other companies. They have different systems, or they made regional decisions. And so I mean, one of my clients had 55 different types of cards across 1,000 facilities, nearly impossible to manage. And that's because the way that the vendor lays out the data, the binary data inside the card, is different. So it's like a little scrambled riddle. Once you crack the riddle, you own the organization. It's not really a security mechanism. That was really a mechanism.
So in this case, is the goal to clone a card or somehow fabricate a card that's compatible that gives you access to the system, or are you taking advantage of the way that it's processing the cards by doing, like, I don't know, I'm imagining a card that reads as quotation marks, semicolon, drop tables or something?
No, I mean, the first thing you have to understand is that all the different ways to look at the data is because the vendors had a loyalty to their channels. So they wanted to keep the people that were selling the card happy, that they could only resell the replacement widgets and nobody else could. So they'd give them a data layout that was specific, that only they could sell and nobody else could sell to their customer. So that's where the obscurity comes in, that we think sometimes the way the data is laid out is around security, but it's not. The goal of breaking the card systems would be, you put them in 2 different buckets. One is where it's clear text, unencrypted, and you have that format riddle. So you'd have X number of bits in the card, but you really don't know where the authentication code, what bits really count for what. Okay, so you have to figure that out. Sometimes it takes me 5 minutes. Sometimes it's pretty instant. Sometimes I've worked on them for a few days. But once you figure that out, you can not only clone the card. Sometimes you can clone the card without figuring that out. But then once you figure that out, you can go ahead and be almost anybody you want to be inside the organization. Essentially, I become my own issuance bureau. And I can figure out and start to use similar methods like in IT, where you're trying to elevate privileges. So trying to go ahead and figure out, what numbers would have been valid if somebody had been there for 10 years and had a lot of privileges. I can start to work that out. And without having to go back to a reference card or scan anybody, I could work that out and encode it on my own.
Mm-hmm. And so In this case, you're saying is basically it's not as simple as ID number equals whatever at the header of the card, but
No.
there's layers of obfuscation. And once you've kind of figured out how that riddle works, you can then pose as the janitor, for instance.
Yeah, and to give you an idea, we all refer to, like, 26-bit. You see like 26-bit in a common, I think, talk inside of a hacker conference, and they'll show you. But the reality is that you have, in any one of those simple cards, you have 6 blocks of 32 bits each. So it's way more than 26 bits. And you kind of have to figure out what 26 bits really count that's being authenticated against a control system.
So what's actually preventing just straight up cloning?
Nothing. On low frequency, you can straight up clone. But the problem is, in a red team, straight up clone doesn't get you much. So if I go ahead and walk past the person at the reception desk and clone their card, I might get access to the door behind me. It doesn't really get me into the data center. If it's a large organization with multiple doors, multiple layers, then you're going to need a little bit more of, elevated privilege. So being able to go ahead and figure out their data formats, being able to manipulate themselves, and elevate privilege comes in pretty handy. So when we go ahead and do this work, we may go ahead and make ourselves 50 valid cards that are different people, and then go ahead and get different levels of privileges all around the organization to get us wherever we want to go. So that would be low frequency. On high frequency, you tend to see added encryption, anywhere from pretty easy to hack within a few minutes, that's symmetric key, to things that I'm not aware that have been hacked yet, and it can get pretty strong.
Why is it that there's encryption in the high frequency but not the low frequency?
Well, the low frequency is like 30 years old. So it was built without security even in the design. You have to remember that the low frequency corporate access cards, contactless and magnetic stripe, their purpose was not to improve security. Their whole point was to replace keyed locks. Because when somebody left with a key or got fired, didn't return the key, you had to send somebody out on site to replace that lock, which was pretty expensive. And then doing it on scale where you had multiple locations and many employees it wasn't scalable. So now, 30 years ago when they started, or 25 years ago when these contactless cards started coming out, the whole value proposition was you can just go ahead and retire that $4 card and hand out a new card. You don't have to replace the lock or touch the lock. So it wasn't trying to solve a security problem, okay? So there was no security built in.
Okay, and so for the high-frequency cards that do have encryption, are we talking about something where there's an actual key exchange, or there's actually a negotiation or a handshake of some sort?
Yes.
Or is it really only one way?
Some of the older technologies are one way. Some of the newer ones are mutual. But one of the biggest problems in physical security, which is ID cards, for corporate access, is generally they're built with upon symmetric keys. And when you think about it, if we were paralleling to IT, if we were going to go ahead and do key management, we probably wouldn't do symmetric key. We probably wouldn't let the manufacturer establish our symmetric key and be the custodian of it. And we would make sure that our symmetric key is different than everybody else's. And we probably wouldn't put that symmetric key on the outside of every door. And so what you have in physical security right now is you have symmetric keys on all these building access control readers literally hanging on the outside of the door saying, hack me.
Yeah, and if it's from a vendor that's known to use certain defaults, it may be the same across multiple organizations.
When you've heard about the recent attacks on stuff like iClass, it's because of that weak custodian model that it could be exploited in how it was stored, the fact it was the same key across multiple customers, very poor key management. The markets learn from that and they're evolving, but the capitalization cycle of this technology and organization is different than IT. IT, if you get a 5-year TCO, you're looking pretty good. These systems stay in place for 10 to 15 years. So you generally can't really go make a decision and then in 7 years you're okay if it's broken. You probably have to negotiate with your management as to how you're going to deal with that on an accelerated capitalization schedule. So a lot more diligence needs to go at it, but the systems are generally 10 to 15 years behind what we find in IT as well as the security principles.
So it's
right?
similar to SCADA and PLCs where you find, physical meat space, big expensive gear. They don't like to replace those too often.
Yeah, it's, you're digging, you have a lot of locations. I mean, I have clients that they do business in 100 countries. They have 10,000, 15,000 of these card readers in different access points. They have, 100,000 card holders. And it's a pretty big, long project to touch everything, recycle everything, reinstall everything. And it's hard to justify to management, what do you mean we're replacing these cards and these readers on doors? We need to be building another manufacturing facility in China, not spending money on this. So it gets pretty interesting.
So as a security researcher, what would you say is the first step I should go about in the journey to start auditing RFID?
Yeah, I think the first thing is every IT organization should know what they have because that's what's protecting their data center. And typically it's managed by somebody else, but they should care and not just give it the invisible approval stamp just because it looks like a card and not a key. The first thing I would do is make sure that your authentication password is not printed on the card. You would not believe it, but by default, most of the manufacturers print your authentication password on the card itself.
So it's like a backup?
No, it's done because that's how people love to be able to take the card off the stack and enter it into the system for convenience. But, I say, hey, in IT, you would never order a laptop from Dell and etch the password, like vendor default, onto the lid of the Dell.
No, you'd put it on the sticky note under the keyboard, obviously.
Well, actually, the sticky note, you could take it away if you wanted to, but when you print it on the card, it makes it kind of difficult. So a lot of times I'll go get a hold of a card, I'll social engineer somebody just to show it to me, and I pretty much can figure it out just with that bit of information to not clone, but just go ahead and start minting other numbers. It gives me a lot of information just by doing that. And the larger the organization, the bigger, because there's more people to target.
So if I'm curious and I just want to, get started playing around, are there any particular tools or Android apps or things of that nature that I might want to look into?
Yeah, the Android apps really don't help because they don't emit 125 kilohertz frequency. So you're not really going to do what 80% of the corporate enterprises have. So there's a tool called Proxmark. It's pretty simple. It's pretty common. You can buy it online. That'll help you go ahead and read cards, get the raw data, and you can start playing with it. Once you start playing with it, there's really no magic to it. You just figure out that what they call the format, the little riddle, and you're kind of well on your way. It's pretty cool. There's some tricks to doing that, which we went through in the course of how to do that more effectively, how to maybe automate it. And then from there, the Proxmark also does high frequency that has the encryption codes. So then you can break symmetric keys and start tackling that stuff as well.
That sounds pretty cool. I mean, if you're the kind of geek that's into, cracking DEF CON badges, this seems like something right up your alley. Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate you coming on and telling us a little bit on this. Where can people find out more about your work?
You can go to my website. I have papers. We also have the deck available for people that attended the training. But if you didn't attend and you still want the deck, we're glad to go ahead and give you access to it. The other thing, just one more point, is the vulnerabilities also in the access control system. So we brought a whole server. We actually brought a whole mini portable building access environment. And you can break into the control system. So when you use the combination of social engineering, breaking the cards, and also the control system, there's a whole new element. Sometimes you don't even have to break the card. Sometimes you just break into the control system itself, enter in a whole new card scheme into the system, push it out to the door that you want to get into, and then make yourself the card that matches. There's also
just thinking about what you're talking about, these cards being in place for 15 years, I'm just scared to think of all of the, Windows XP boxes running these esoteric vendor lockdown card systems.
It is, and half the implementations that I see, the integrator set the servers up, the systems up with default passwords. So once you get in there, you can actually implement controls like this one system. You can time the doors opening and closing. So you can just go into
you don't even need a card. You just start walking through doors.
Doors 1 through 5 to open and close on the schedule, and then I'm going to go and delete the audit logs after I get back, and I didn't even need a card. I could just triage the whole thing.
Oh,
so the systems are also weak. Even if you get the RFID stronger, there are new standards that use asymmetric keys and multiple, dual algorithms that are getting better, but it doesn't mean it solves all your problems. I think the whole physical security program, again, is 10 to 15 years behind IT. There's really no effective governance, audit. I'm working with large organizations to bring that in scope, so their whole environment is really much more secure and visible. And I think that's the biggest advice is don't treat your physical security environment any different than you would IT from a security principle standpoint. And you're going to find a lot of holes over here, but you'll be able to plug them with the current methodology that you employ on the IT side.
Yeah, so it sounds like really the vendors are kind of like in an old school mindset.
Yeah.
Is there a particular vendor that actually does this well?
There is, but since I'm an analyst, I'd probably rather not, rather not pick one over the other. I'd say that the majority don't do it well, and there are a handful trying to do it better, and it's getting there. I think it'll take a few years.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Terry. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for the time.
Domain.com and .club came to Hak5 with a great idea. Build a club all about learning stuff, making things, and having fun. And so we did just that, and man, what a brilliant idea. We recently hosted our very first ever open house at the Hak5 warehouse, and with the help of Domain.com and .club, we put on a mini LAN party, micro drone obstacle course, 3D print fest, quadcopter race, and killer barbecue. And I must say, these guys get it. The internet, and hacker culture in particular, it's all about fostering community. From BBSs to FidoNet to IRC, it's all about coming together and having fun, and what better domain to do it than a .club? It's perfect because a .club is universally and globally understood, not just here in the United States. So if you're building a new business or naming your startup, consider a .club as the ultimate social domain. Join us in the San Francisco Bay Area for workshops and projects and crazy indoor quadcopter races at our very own .club, hackhouse.club. Then head over to domain.com/club to register your .club today. They're only $9.99 a year, and there are thousands of awesome options still available. Make sure to use the coupon code HAK5 to save 15% and let the guys over at domain.com know we sent you. So, when you think domain names, think domain.com.
One of my favorite talks at DEF CON was one by Martha, who is happily here with us today. Hi, Martha. How are you?
Hello. Fine. Thank you.
So your talk was titled, "Tell Me Who You Are and I Will Tell You Your Lock Pattern." And I found that so interesting and intriguing. So I believe my first question to you was, my Android lock pattern? How would you know?
Yeah. First, I started analyzing or looking at a lot of passwords and the predictability of text-based passwords, like how my mom and dad and friends and family select passwords. And I was starting to think, what about the Android lock pattern? It's just a couple of dots, and it would be interesting to find a way to predict people's patterns.
So you found out that you can actually predict people's patterns because humans are actually predictable.
Yeah, basically, that was the start.
So how many lock patterns are available in the world for somebody to use on an Android phone?
When you use a 3x3 grid, that's 9 dots, it's about 389, 112 possible combinations.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So how in the world could you take hundreds of thousands of different patterns that a person could use and figure out their predictability?
So because of the scheme itself, we had to find other ways to analyze the patterns. So we started to look at the physical aspects, how you kind of create the patterns, how you hold your mobile phone. If you're left and right-handed, how do you start to create patterns, for instance? And also fun stuff like how does gender, age, how does that impact the way we create patterns?
That's crazy. So all of those different scientific facts can actually predict a person's pattern, just like it can predict a person's password as well?
Yeah, correctly.
Wow, that's so weird.
It's a different way to look at the pattern or passwords
Okay.
than have been before, because a lot of researchers have looked at just the password themselves, not exactly who created the passwords, because that's kind of very interesting to see when you want to predict someone's password.
So did you actually get a group of people together to test this theory on?
No, not actually. I created a custom-made survey that only was available for mobile devices, and I just broadcasted it out and used my network for people to participate. So people actually use the mobile phone and to create the pattern. So it's a standard web application simulating the scheme. So
And
they actually created the patterns.
And then with the survey, you also asked them things about their profiles, such as if they're right or left-handed, et cetera, as well?
Yeah, exactly. And then we collected a lot of information about the respondents. We only collected data that was not traceable back to the person, of course. But we collected a lot of information. And unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to present all of the results. So hopefully my master thesis will be available.
Oh, so is this for school as well?
Yeah, the research I've done, that's my master thesis. So this was a 1 year with fun completing my master's, yeah.
So knowing how predictable a person can be, if I walked up to one of my friends and I noticed that they are right-handed, they know a lot about security, they're a male, they're 40 years old and they have 2 kids, you're telling me that I would be able to predict what kind of passcode they're going to use on their lock screen for their Android device.
Yeah. At first, there is 389,000 combinations, and I only collected 4,000, and that doesn't match. So in the future, to be able to do that precisely is to kind of estimate a likelihood for selecting a pattern.
Right.
So with my data for now, it's possible to eliminate a lot of combinations. So the number of possible combinations will be very low. But to be able to say, just tell me who you are, you have to simulate it in a way.
Right. Now, let's say that you could probably sell this data. It would be worth a lot of money, I believe. Do you think that, given that people are so predictable and given that if you know all this profile data about a person, you could definitely dwindle down 300,000 different passcodes, is there a way that a person can secure themselves even more knowing that they are a predictable person?
Yeah, of course. That is one way to use it. And I got a lot of requests a couple of days now with suggestions for how to use the data. And that is one of the suggestions for the use, to kind of create an application for people to test their patterns to see if they're predictable. But the problem with that is if I tell what is predictable and not, then the pattern themselves will be predictable.
Right. You end up in this domino effect of the same predictability happening again and again. It's like we actually need, we need computers to do it for us, for real algorithms, real random algorithms. So where do you see this data going from here?
For now, I've been in touch with the German researcher that have done a lot of research on the Android pattern lock. And he did kind of something of the same that I did, but he did not have the same background information about the users. So by combining the research, it might be possible to be able to predict more precisely than before. So what he has done, he's built a statistical model called the Markov model, that will give kind of an estimate based on information how likely a pattern is to be selected. So by adding my data with kind of the left, right-handed, gender, age, that would be interesting to use that to get that predictability, or to get that model to be better, to get it more precisely.
So this is more on a personal note. Do you find the Android lock pattern to be the most secure option, or would you prefer a different kind of lock for mobile phones?
It's a very interesting question because a lot of people ask about that. I don't think that it's safe because I don't think people know how to use it correctly.
Right.
People don't know how to set up. For instance, you don't need to show the arrows in your pattern. You can turn that off. And you can also randomize the grid. So when you get smudges on the screen, you can you create the pattern in different areas on the screen, but it's the same pattern.
And would you give any kind of opinions to companies that are using this kind of lock pattern? Would you recommend any kind of other options for them?
It is hard to, because whatever you ask your employees to do, maybe a PIN code or passcode or whatever, I think people will be predictable in any way. But I think the best security tip when coming to passwords is not to ask their employees to reset their password very often.
Yes.
Because that's a big security issue that causes a lot of predictability.
That's so true.
It's a candy jar for hackers.
Yes, it is. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Martha, where can people find out more about your work? And if they're interested in this, where can they contact you?
It will be available at my web page soon, I hope. It's a master thesis at the university, so I don't have the signal for, I don't know if I'm allowed to send it out yet because you have to be graded and everything. But hopefully it will be added to my webpage, marteloge.no. If you Google my name, you will find it.
Okay,
and I will provide it hopefully in a month.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And I know it was a few weeks from DEF CON, so I hope that Las Vegas has been out of your system for a while now.
So nice to talk to you.
You too. Thank you so much. And for everybody watching Hak5, you can visit Martha online.
That just about wraps up this week's episode of Hak5, but before we get going... we got a gift from a fan. I love a gift from a fan.
He hasn't seen it yet. Okay, so he said, this is from Harpo. He says, I've been watching the show for years. I learn a lot from you guys. I notice you get all starry-eyed every time you mention Yingling. Oh. I just happen to live in Yingling land.
Pottsville?
Southeastern
is he in
Pennsylvania.
Pottsville?
I have done the brewery tour in Pottsville at least 17 times. Enclosed is a piece of Yingling swag you may find useful for set or warehouse decoration purposes.
He sent us Yingling?
For the awesome shows. It's an amazing beach towel.
This is a beach towel. It looks like a wooden engraved, like, what?
It does.
It's a surfboard.
It looks like a surfboard.
Dude, I don't want to open it.
It's one of those like shrink-wrapped beach towels, you know,
right?
Like t-shirts.
Oh man,
Isn't
that's
that cute?
rad.
Yeah, so I think we should hang up the beach towel
somewhere.
somewhere.
Just go like with the, you know, since we've got the whole theme of, you know what that's, it's,
oh God, it's gonna fall.
Yeah, next on Hak5, we move to Venice Beach.
So thank you, Harpo. That was very, very thoughtful. We really appreciate it. And before we leave, I hope you really enjoyed the interviews this week. We have a couple more that we are going to be recording
we're getting
as well.
into some fun encrypted communication stuff, you know,
Yes,
darknet stuff. Not darknet stuff, but darknet stuff. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see where it leads. It could be fun.
Yeah.
That'll be next week. I also wanted to mention that we have a pen test with Hak5 going on. So if you haven't already, check it out, pentestwithhak5.com. And you can learn the ins and outs of the Wi-Fi pineapple, the USB rubber ducky, the land turtle, and Metasploit with myself as well as Sebastian Kinna and our very own Mubix, aka Rob Fuller.
And of course, if you have any questions about what you've seen today on the show, or you want to contact us directly, you can email us feedback@hak5.org. We read all of the emails, don't reply to every single one, but we do read them. So thank you for everybody who does email us there. And of course, Hack Shop, hakshop.com. That's where you can find all the cool gadgets that we sell here at the Hak5 warehouse. And is that it?
And hackhouse.club, which I mentioned at the top.
Yes.
So we're having a little barbecue on the 29th. We'd love to see you here. hakhouse.club is where you can sign up to come on over. It'll be fun this Saturday.
I'm excited.
Yes, me
Can't
too.
wait to get my barbecue on.
I can't wait to get my drone deathmatch on.
Food babies.
All right. Well, with all of that, I'm Darren Kitchen.
I'm Shannon Morse.
Trust your technolust. Thanks for the evening.
Yes, thank you.
What if it was just strips of RGB over and ooh, I know. You should do NTSC color bars. You know what I'm talking
Yep,
about.
I know what you're talking about.
And then you can walk around going, ooh. Oh, never the same color. Please do not attempt to adjust your snubs. She just goes this way.